abbey town, a long, long while ago, there officiated a sexton and a gravedigger. In the churchyard, his name one Gabriel Grubb. He was an ill-conditioned, cross-grained, surly fellow who consorted with nobody but himself and an old wicker bottle which fitted into his large, deep waistcoat pocket. A little before midnight, one Christmas Eve, Gabriel shouldered his spade, lighted his lantern, and betook himself towards the old churchyard, for he had a grave to finish. A grave to finish by next morning. And feeling very low, he thought it might raise his spirits, perhaps, if he went to work on it at once. He strolled out along the road and turned into a dark lane which led into a churchyard. It was a nice, gloomy, mournful place into which the townspeople did not care to go except in broad daylight. And consequently he was not a little indignant to hear a young urchin roaring out some jolly song about Christmas. Gabriel Grubb waited until the boy came up, then rapped him over the head with his lantern 5 or 6 times in order to modulate his voice. As the boy hurried away with his hand to his head, Gabriel Grubb chuckled. He entered the churchyard and locked the gate behind him. He took off his coat and put down his lantern, and getting into an unfinished grave, worked at it for an hour or so with right good will. But the earth was hardened with frost, and it was no easy matter to break up and shovel out all the earth. At any other time this would have made Gabriel very miserable, but he was so pleased at having stopped the small boy singing that he took little heed of the scanty progress he'd made. And when he'd finished the work for the night and looked down into the grave with grim satisfaction, he murmured as he gathered up his things, "A brave lodgings for one, brave lodgings for one, a few feet of cold earth when your life is done." He sat himself down on a tombstone, which was a favourite resting place of his, and he drew forth once again his wicker bottle. "A coffin at Christmas, a Christmas box." Repeated a voice beside him. "It's the echoes." And he raised the glass again. "It was not," said a deep voice. Gabriel started up and stood rooted to the spot with terror, for his eyes rested on a form that made his blood run cold. Seated on an upright tombstone close to him was a strange, unearthly creature. He was sitting perfectly still, grinning at Gabriel Grubb with such a grin as only a goblin could call up. "What do you do here on Christmas Eve?" said the goblin sternly. I came to dig a grave, sir," stammered Gabriel. "And what man wanders among graves on such a night as this?" cried the goblin. In the distance, a chorus of "Gabriel Grubb, Gabriel Grubb." A wild, screeching chorus that seemed to fill the churchyard. "And what have you got in that bottle?" said the goblin. "Hollands, sir," replied the sexton, trembling more than ever, for he had bought it off the smugglers, and he thought the questioner might be in the excise department of the goblins. "And who drinks Hollands alone in a churchyard on such a night as this?" "Gabriel Grubb, Gabriel Grubb," the wild chorus exclaimed. "And who is our lawful prize, then?" exclaimed the goblin, raising his voice, and the invisible chorus once again cried out his name, "Gabriel Grubb, Gabriel Grubb." Well, Gabriel Grubb, what do you say to this? The goblin had a broad grin, broader than before. The sexton gasped. What do you think of this, Gabriel? It's it's very curious, very pretty, replied the sexton, half dead with fright. But I think I'll just go back and finish my work, if you please, sir. The grave, sir. Oh, the grave. And who makes a grave at a time when other men are merry and takes pleasure in it? And the voices again chorused, Gabriel Grubb, Gabriel Grubb. I'm afraid my friends want you, Gabriel. Under favours, sir, replied the horror-stricken sexton. I don't think they can. They don't know me, sir. I don't think the gentlemen have ever seen me. Oh, yes, they have. We know the man who struck the boy in the envious malice of his heart because the boy could be merry and he could not. Here the goblins gave a loud, shrill laugh, which the echoes returned 20-fold. Well, I'm afraid, sir, I must leave you, said the sexton, making the effort to go. Leave us, said the goblin. Oh, oh. And as the goblin laughed, he suddenly darted towards Gabriel, laid a hand upon his collar, and sank him through the earth. And when he had had time to fetch his breath, he found himself in what appeared to be a large cavern, surrounded on all sides by goblins, ugly and grim. And now, said the king of the goblins, seated at the centre of the room on an elevated seat, his friend from the churchyard. And now, show the man of misery and gloom a few of the pictures from our great storehouse. And as the goblin said this, a cloud rolled gradually away and disclosed a small, scantily furnished but neat apartment. Little children were gathered round a bright fire, clinging to their mother's gown, or gambling around a chair. A frugal meal was spread upon the table, and an elbow chair was placed near the fire. Soon the father entered, and the children ran to meet him. And as he sat down to his meal, the mother sat by his side, and all seemed happiness and comfort. What do you think of that? Said the goblin. Gabriel murmured something about it. Very pretty. Show him some more, said the goblin. And many times the cloud went and came, and many lessons it taught to Gabriel Grubb. He saw that men who worked hard and earned scantily bread were cheerful and happy. And he came to the conclusion it was a very respectable sort of world after all. No sooner had he formed it than the cloud closed over the last picture, and he seemed to settle on his senses and lull him into repose. And one by one, the goblins faded from his sight, and as the last one disappeared, he sank to sleep. The day had broken when he awoke, and he found himself lying on the flat gravestone with the wicker bottle empty by his side. He got to his feet as well as he could, and brushing the frost off his coat, he turned his face towards the town. But he was an altered man. He had learned lessons of gentleness and good nature by his strange encounters with the goblins in the cavern.